in the thousands, in the millions, and we will be. Because it starts right here.
Guilty.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Naptown People's Radio, a new podcast brought to you by PSL Indianapolis. I'm your host, Derek Ford, and I'm here with my co-host,
Danny Abdullah.
We've been overwhelmed by the response we've gotten so far. Thank you so much. It's clear that the city needs a truly independent political analysis of the real issues we face. And as organizers involved in these issues, at Naptown People's Radio, we're not just reporting the news, we're making it happen, and we're making it happen with you.
On this episode, we're going to delve into the politics of Freedom Day, also known as Juneteenth, and the celebrations and commemorations that happened over the weekend, as well as what's on the forefront of everyone's mind, the threat of an all-out U.S. war against Iran, which has regional and potentially global implications. We'll interview Lindsay Holtgrave, one of the lead organizers of Answer Indiana, about the recent protests held in the city, talk about the role of the U.S. anti-war movement, and debunk the myths circulating about Iran and more. But before we get into that, let's spill the tea in the Naptown Breakdown. All right, Derek, what you got for us today?
All right, so a couple of things. I mean, as you said, this weekend was celebration, commemoration of Juneteenth, or Freedom Day. It marks 160 years since a Union Major General Gordon Granger issued the order that officially proclaimed the freedom of the last enslaved people in Galveston, Texas. And, historically, it was a commemoration, marked by the people who ended chattel slavery, which were the enslaved people, their quote unquote, free Black allies, if you will, as well as other abolitionists in the struggle. Because, for those of us who know real history, we know that nobody freed the slaves but themselves.
That's right.
And in June, or I guess in 2021, Juneteenth became officially a recognized federal holiday in an attempt to sort of whitewash it. And of course, in response to the uprisings against the war on Black America that had taken place in 2020. But this is something that's very difficult to whitewash. And so it's contradictory. On Friday, we had the Shaka Shakur Freedom Campaign here, and Shaka Shakur gave a presentation about these contradictions, right? And he really said that we need to focus on, I guess, the positive side of the contradiction is that it's an educational opportunity. So we want to educate the people about, the real history of Juneteenth, and the contradiction that remains with us is that Black people still aren't free. Right. And I think, as evidence of that, recently in Indianapolis, we can think about the IMPD assault on Devin Hunt on Saturday, June 15th, and the straight up lies that they are, circulating through the media outlets. And we have a video up on IndyLiberationCenter.org that some of our comrades put together that just goes through each of these lies and shows video evidence debunking them. So just to go over a couple, right? So at 3:30 a.m., it was Sunday, June 15th. That's when IMPD officers violently assaulted Devin Hunt. And they analyzed multiple videos capturing the attack. Basically. So the IMPD said, quote, an officer observed two men begin shouting at one another and engaging in physical confrontation as a crowd gathered around them, end quote. So there was shouting, but there was absolutely no fighting. Then the IMPD said they intervened. They gave multiple verbal commands for both men to separate. One of the men walked away while the other remained. But in reality, one of the officers is clearly heard giving a command to stop, and Devin Hunt immediately complies, right? So after Devin stopped, the officer takes an additional step toward him. Devin did what the officer wanted, and the officer instead mockingly repeated the question back to him, right? And then they claim that he, squared his shoulders, right? Or he swiped his hand away. But in reality, the officer is the one who's getting closer and closer to Devin. And then saying, give me space, bro, basically. Don't effing touch me. And the whole thing is just, littered with lies. And it's the fact that the IMPD can circulate this this response when the people have all the video evidence, at their hands, and think that they can get away with it. I think maybe a new day has come, and that is the positive outcome, of that we need to seize on for the contradiction of Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think, first off, I think about Shaka frequently. But, I was writing to Shaka after his event, and just I've been celebrating Freedom Day before the United States decided that it was going to be a quote unquote real holiday. They were going to recognize it, right? Because I'm always going to celebrate my people, whether the United States wants to celebrate my people or not.
For sure.
But it's difficult to celebrate Freedom Day when, my comrade is not free. And it really, makes me think about, and hopefully it makes other people think about, like, what does freedom mean? Like, what does it mean to be free in a country that is, outright putting people in prison who should not be there? Not just Shaka, but Vernon T. Bateman is still not free. Kofi Madibo Ajabu is not free. The list goes on and on of people who are literally enslaved by this country still to this day, and it is legal. But yeah, sure, get off on June 19th every year. You don't have to go to work, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, any day off of work is a good day. But,
that's true.
It reminds me of what Lenin said when he opened up State and Revolution. I'm going to read a little quote just because I think it applies to so often. Mm-hmm. So he says, during the lifetime of great revolutionaries, the oppressing classes constantly hounded them, received their theories with the most savage malice, the most furious hatred, and the most unscrupulous campaigns of lies and slander. After their death, attempts are made to convert them into harmless icons, to canonize them, so to say, and to hollow their names to a certain extent for the consolation of the oppressed classes, and with the object of duping the latter, while at the same time robbing the revolutionary theory of its substance, blunting its revolutionary edge, and vulgarizing it. So, Lenin is writing at a time when they're doing that to Marxism, but think about, Malcolm, Martin Luther King Jr., right? All those, like Juneteenth, that's what they're trying to do. But just because they're trying to do it doesn't mean it's done.
Absolutely. Dr. King is so whitewashed today. People always want to quote Dr. King, but they're never quoting, his letter from a Birmingham jail, right? Y'all threw Dr. King in jail. Like, what would y'all do to me?
Yeah.
And I love that you didn't say, there's this myth that, talking about lies and slander, there's this myth that, 1865 is when Black people in Texas found out that they were free to go. And like, they knew, like, all the United States did was go and bring armed forces to be like, hey, you got to let these people go. But like, Black people are not stupid. This myth that Black people didn't know what was happening, or we had no, we knew that life was bigger than on this plantation, right? And we just needed, the militia to come and do their job for once.
Yeah, well, you need guns.
Yeah,
basically.
You need guns, like, they wasn't trying to die. Yeah. They needed to continue to survive, right? And 1865, that was just the year that they finally decided, oh, okay, I guess we're going to go down here and do the right thing for, whatever reason it was. But Black people knew that they were free. Yeah. So yeah, that is a myth that has been, perpetrated for some reason. I don't know what it could be.
Weird.
For 160 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the thing, of course, with, Devin Hunt's case, we don't need guns, right? We have the facts on our side.
Absolutely.
And so we just need to really get the people to know the facts. So,
Absolutely.
Go to the website, watch the video for yourself, see it with your own two eyes, believe your own eyes, don't believe the police's lies.
Absolutely.
And, and stay tuned for next steps in terms of getting justice for Devin Hunt and all the other IMPD victims who basically uphold a racist, capitalist system.
Okay, so now we're going to take a short break and we'll be back with Lindsay Holtgrave of Answer Indiana. You're listening to Naptown People's Radio, coming to you from our studio at the Indianapolis Liberation Center.
This is Griffin, and in addition to organizing with Y'all for All, I'm a proud volunteer with the Indianapolis Liberation Center and the center's Fonseca Du Bois Gallery. Recently, I performed in drag for the first time as a part of a radical drag show, Pride Without Policing, also organized through the center. It's an honor to be amongst the groups that make up the Indianapolis Liberation Center, our city's liberated space where working, poor, and oppressed communities unite to build collective power. Located at 18th and Meridian Street, the Indianapolis Liberation Center is rooted in a fundamental truth. Liberation is never given by the oppressor, it is won through organized, united struggle. Unity is never simple, so we actively bridge the divides imposed by the ruling class through education, culture, politics, spirituality, and more. We reject competition and embrace cooperation, bringing together community members, organizers, and others to train a new generation of activists. Together, we're fighting for a world built on the interests of the people and the planet. By organizing across our city, we're reviving a collective spirit and renewing our belief in a better, necessary future. This work is hard, and it's not free. We depend on supporters like you to keep the center open and growing. Visit IndyLiberationCenter.org to learn more, donate, sign up for our weekly newsletter, and get involved today. Your support ensures this liberated space thrives, opening new avenues in the struggle for liberation. Thank you for your support, and now back to Naptown People's Radio.
Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people.
And welcome back to Naptown People's Radio. We're here with Lindsay Holtgrave, who's one of the lead organizers of Answer Indiana. Welcome, Lindsay.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And first, can you, for our listeners who might not be familiar with Answer Indiana, could you talk to us about what exactly the organization is?
Yeah, for sure. So ANSWER stands for Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. The original coalition started just days after 9/11. It was a coalition of several different groups that just banded together to say no to war and no to racism. Answer Indiana, in particular, started in about 2017, and our overall goal is to make a broad anti-war, anti-racism movement here in Indiana that can truly challenge the U.S. war machine.
That's great. And you've definitely been consistent in your activities since you started. We've seen you in the streets a lot, organizing for Palestine, organizing buses to get people to D.C. for Palestine. And I remember, I think it was, when was it? November 4th was the largest ever pro-Palestine demonstration in D.C. that they were talking about all over the world. I arrived in Japan in January, the next year. And the first person I saw who had been he teaches in China and been to Russia, he was like, everybody was talking about it. Brian Becker was all over the news, answer. So yeah, definitely great work. So can you talk to us? I believe that Answer Indiana recently organized 2 emergency demonstrations to protest the looming or the threat of war against Iran. So what went down?
Yeah, so our first protest was last week on Thursday. It was in response to the Israeli bombardment of the capital of Iran. That resulted in a large amount of civilian casualties, as well as the assassination of Irani leadership and Irani scientists. And so we went out to the streets and protested this action because we don't want any war that is funded by our tax dollars, which it was. And then on Sunday, we took to the streets again because the U.S. is now involved in this. Trump was very proud in saying that the military had targeted 3 nuclear sites in Iran. And yeah, so we just wanted to take to the streets to make sure that the people knew that we are not for this war. We're not for any sort of bombing campaign that is funded by our tax dollars.
And I think, one, it's very reminiscent of like the early 2000s, right? And George Bush Jr. Talking about these weapons of mass destruction, right? And that's why the U.S. had to go to Iraq and bomb Iraq. And talking about these nuclear weapons that Iran has, right? There are no nuclear weapons in Iran. And in fact, the only nuclear weapons in the Middle East are in Israel, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, because of the propaganda of the United States, there are people here who truly believe that Iran is the enemy. On Sunday, when Answer was out protesting, there was another protest happening as well, correct?
Right.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about what was going on there?
Yeah, so it was a small protest that took place in Broad Ripple. I don't think that they had very many people, less than 10, I think.
Yeah, I think it was like 8 people.
Yeah. And they were hyping up the Shah, and like it was just kind of strange. But I think it really says something, the fact that they had so little with them, whereas, we had a pretty large gathering for a protest that we only had 15 hours to organize.
So what do you feel like contributed to the differences in the 2 protests on Sunday?
Yeah, so our protest was, larger and more organized. It was more professional in the sense that you could see like the cohesion and the direction and organization of it, whereas theirs was more of a ragtag group of reactionaries who were just making the statement that they believe that Iran should return to, its colonial roots with the U.S.
And one of the things that they were walking around with like these signs of like talking about the Shah. And so for listeners who might not be as familiar with Iranian history or what the Shah is, can you give just maybe like a brief like synopsis, like what is that? What is the Shah?
Yeah, the Shah was a U.S.-backed dictatorship that was ruling in Iran prior to the revolution that took place in 1979. And so, one of their things that they were saying was like, we want freedom for people in Iran, Israel, and most importantly, Americans. But freedom for who? Certainly not for the Iranians, because there was a reason that they revolted and replaced the Shah. It was because, the dictatorship before was exploitative and was there to extract their resources. And yeah.
Yeah. And it was extremely brutal, And I mean, of course, it was imposed on them, right? Because I think in 1906, Iran had a constitutional sort of, parliament situation, right? And then in 1953, Mossadegh was elected. And he was a sort of populist, social democrat. And a month earlier, before the election, the parliament decided to nationalize Iranian oil. Which meant taking BP's oil away from BP. And so that's when, in August of 1953, Mossadegh's government was overthrown by a coup. And, the Shah was literally put in place. And it wasn't just like a U.S.-backed coup. It was like a U.S. coup straight up. And even Amnesty International, a broken clock is right twice a day. They were like the secret police that the Shah had. He called himself the King of Kings. The secret police, the Savak, they said, the worst human rights record on the planet. And they were, of course, trained by none other than the CIA. And so 1979, so basically like they're calling for a return to like pre-1979, where where like Iranians are terrorized by, these secret police forces under a king that they have no say in electing and they have no power over. Right. Mm-hmm. Whereas today, Iran is much different. There's elections, there's a turnover of leadership from one generation to the next. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, they have control over their own country.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think that the last thing the United States wants is for, countries to actually be in charge of themselves. Right. It is literally Iranian nationalists who were able to win the revolution along with communists in Iran, right? They worked together to overthrow the Shah. And ever since then, there has been this demonization of Iranians because how dare you want freedom for yourself? How dare you want the autonomy to make decisions for yourselves and for your people? Right. And so I think my next question for you, Lindsay, is, you talked about the size of the protest. And I was there and it was a great number of people that were there. And it was amazing because, again, the demonization of Iran in this country goes back further than anyone in this room has been alive. Mm-hmm. Right. But the size of the protest from Sunday, there's a significant difference between that and the protest that Answer has put on for Palestine. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, why do you think that is?
Yeah, so, the American government is pretty consistent with the way that their strategy for attacking a country or a region. And, the first thing they have to do is dehumanize the area. Mm-hmm. And Iran was one of their, earliest targets with that, I believe. And so they have been forcing propaganda on us, at least since I've been alive. So, I did have one of my fellow organizers who said he's in his mid-30s. He was like, yeah, never in my life did I think that I would see people who were standing with Iran because especially since 9/11, 9/11 was a key part in this dehumanization campaign of anyone from the Middle East region. But he was saying, yeah, he's been so familiar with that propaganda. It's so deeply rooted in our culture in America that it's pretty surprising to see how many people are no longer listening to that rhetoric and are seeing what's truly happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was one of the speakers, Sam James, was during their speech talked about how Netanyahu has been talking about since 1992, which for context, I was born in 1992. But since 1992, I'm not supposed to cuss. Okay. Since 1992, Netanyahu has been saying any day, any moment, Iran is going to unleash these nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. So literally my entire life, I just turned 33 last week, right? My entire life for 33 years, Iran has allegedly been supposed to unleash these nuclear weapons on the world. And it's amazing what happens when our history is not accessible to us and when we're not able to study, right? Which that is on purpose because as soon as I found that out, I'm like, dang, since 1992, you've been saying any day now, they're going to unleash these nuclear weapons on the world. And that still has not happened.
Right.
But what happened was the U.S. and Israel have bombed Iran. I've never seen a bomb in Indianapolis. I've never seen Iran bomb Indianapolis,
Or threaten to.
Yeah. Right. Between North Korea and Iran, man, I'm not supposed to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, for real.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So you're doing a lot. Like Answer is doing a lot right now. What's next? What's next for Answer?
What's next? You know, we stay busy. There's certainly going to be more actions to be had for Iran and Palestine. We also have our ongoing art campaign. So we reached out to a bunch of local artists in the area and asked them to submit anti-war, anti-racism artwork so that we could paint the city with this pro-peace message. And I was honestly shocked with how many submissions that we got and how high quality they are. So now that we've launched our membership for Answer Indiana and we're focusing on broadening the base to not just be within Indianapolis, we're going to do a statewide day of action where we take that art to the streets and flyer the whole state.
That'll be beautiful. It'll make Indiana look like the visual economy will be much more pleasant and
Absolutely.
accurate, probably. Because I bet if you were to ask like most people on the street, like, hey, do you want to go like die in Iran? They would be like, what are you talking about? No, you know? I'm sure that it expresses the sentiment of the people instead of just the, Rokita or whatever. And also the columnist from the Indy Star, Michael J. Hicks, who wrote that disgusting piece about how Trump is inept at everything, but he could actually carry through a war with Iran. I don't know if you saw that. That was June 19th.
Not on Juneteenth. Not on Freedom Day.
Especially because, I was just reading this, an interview so Malcolm X's brother, Wilfred Little, he gave a talk at University of Massachusetts Amherst in 1995. And it's a talk, and it's like a lecture, but it's also kind of an interview. And it's interesting because he says, quote, "A lot of people don't know that Iran, of all places, put out a postage stamp with Malcolm on it. In what they called their Year of Freedom struggle, they had a big demonstration. People by the thousands, as far as you can see, had big billboards with Malcolm X's picture, and they put that on a postage stamp. It shows you the esteem with which he was held in these countries where they began to know him as he really was." And Iran was actually the first country to put Malcolm X on a postage stamp. The U.S. did it like 15 years later, but it wasn't only symbolic, and it wasn't the first time that they had supported the Black struggle in the U.S. In 1980, actually, like hundreds of thousands of Iranians in May took to the streets to express their solidarity with Black people in the U.S. Because the quote-unquote Miami riots were happening. Because in 1979, late 1979, 4 white cops, Miami-Dade cops, beat to death an unarmed Black man, insurance salesman, and a Marine. And later, of course, got off. And so Iranians took to the streets just as people in Miami did. And they're like, we are with you, So they actually took action, right? But I didn't learn about that growing up. That's not talked about in the news.
Either.
No.
I mean, even the Black media doesn't really talk about that.
No, absolutely not. And first off, that's 1980, right? And so the fact that they found out that happened and they were like, hey, we got to take to the streets and we got to do something is amazing. And it just reminds me of how many people are like, why are you protesting? Why do you do that? Because they see it. The people who need to see it, that's who we're doing it for. We're doing it for the Iranian people. We're doing it for the Palestinian people. And, especially today when this administration is throwing Black and brown people into ICE trucks and, Black kids can't eat because the administration doesn't care about children, and our civil rights are being stripped from us, and the media wants us to believe that Iran is the enemy is ridiculous, right? Muhammad Ali, we talking about he was talking about, the Vietnam War, but it still applies to today. Vietnamese people ain't never called me no N-word, right? Iranians have never called me no N-word. They have never threatened the life of my siblings or myself or my child. And the fact that Iran has been here for Black Americans and it is not talked about is on purpose. Because the media would have you believe that, like, don't nobody like black people? Like, there's nowhere else for you to go. Mm-hmm. Because nobody likes black people. But we got people in Iran protesting because an unarmed black man in 1979 was killed. Iran put Malcolm X on a postage stamp?
And like, just the 1980 protest, that was just months after the revolution. The revolution was in November 1979, right? And of course, that was students who stormed the U.S. Embassy. And the Ayatollah was like, you got to release the black people and the women. And the students eventually were like, fine, we'll do it. They did keep one African-American because he was a journalist and they thought he was a spy. But they released the black people and the women. And they kept all the rest until the negotiations ended. But you think about it, you just have a revolution. 6 months later, like, how many tasks do you have to accomplish? Right? How many things do you have to get done in your own country, yet you take the time and like to actually have a demonstration in support of black people in the U.S.? That's like really, really puts it in perspective for me. Like, I can't imagine, like how much really, how bold and courageous and probably unpopular, because a lot of people are like, what the hell are we doing? Like, we got to focus on, Iran. Like, we've been oppressed for centuries, right?
Absolutely.
But they were like, nope, this is just as important, because it's all part of one struggle.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we not free until we all free. Absolutely. Okay. So you mentioned joining Answer. How do people do that if they want to join Answer? If people hate racism and they hate war, which hopefully if you're listening to this, you hate racism and you hate war. How can they join Answer?
Yeah, so you can just check out answerindiana.org, and that will give you like the synopsis of who we are, and then there are 2 buttons on there. You can click to join, or you can click to donate, but if you're wanting to join, it'll take you to a link and just fill out the application there. And yeah, if you join, you will get a welcome package with literature that you can distribute within your communities, as well as some other goodies. So I really think you guys should apply.
I do too. And I'm looking forward to the national or this statewide day of postering. We'll be sure to let our listeners know when that happens.
Yeah.
Unless you already know. Their date set?
The date is not set yet.
All right.
So, okay. Thank you so much, Lindsay. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure. All right, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back on Naptown People's Radio.
We're going to fight racism, not racism, but we're going to fight it without there. We said we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight socialism.
And we're back at Naptown People's Radio, and we're here joined by our comrade Shaka A. Shakur for his regular segment, Dispatches from Behind the Wire. Welcome to the show, Shaka.
Southside, which means freedom now. I'm going to say free to land. Greetings, comrades. How are y'all? Glad to have the opportunity to speak and record. I didn't really get a chance to do so live last time, but I just want to say this real quick as a formal introduction. I'm a New African political prisoner from Indiana. Been down 23 years, wrongfully convicted and overly sentenced for a crime of attempted murder of Gary Cobb. I was sent into exile, kicked out of the state of Indiana Department of Corrections and sent to Virginia Department of Corrections, where I've been for the last 6.5 years. And one of the things I want to press upon and get out there, and I don't know if these prisoners can hear me out there, but I want to try and call for some prisoner unity, man. Like, I've been down doing time a long time, and we have allowed the state to come in and create a whole lot of divisions, amongst ourselves, where we really don't focus on our human rights, our civil rights, conditions of confinement, taking responsibility for developing and organizing and implementing programs, as well as reaching out to people on the streets, whether it's prison abolitionists, whether it's revolutionary groups, orientation formations, whether it's anarchists or what have you. And that's something that needs to change. Black August is coming up, where we recognize fallen heroes and sheroes within the the New African movement in particular, but political prisoners and revolutionaries in general, and a lot of sacrifices that were made on behalf of us, we remember and commemorate in the month of August. So I just want to put that call out. This is an opportunity. This platform here is an opportunity to give voice to the voiceless. For prisoners who have something that's a real issue that they want to address or speak on. This is an opportunity to do that. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm calling it. Dispatches from behind the wire. As a war correspondent, let's get our truth out there. Let us try to control the narrative and speak for ourselves as opposed to having other people that haven't lived our experience or don't have our best interests at heart speak on our behalf. We can have the opportunity to do so for ourselves, and raise legitimate issues that needs to be addressed. And the other thing is, too, these are serious times. You know what I'm saying? Whatever your politics may be, left, right, center, or what have you, these are serious times in this country, in this empire. You understand? And you have to ask yourself, especially if you got family out there on the streets, or you got kids out there on the streets, nieces and nephews out there on the streets. You have to ask yourself, what kind of society do we want to live in? What kind of world do we want to live in? You understand? What kind of nation or country do you want to live in? And what are you doing to contribute to the positive aspects aside of that vision of what you want to live in? And if you have a positive vision, amongst other things, you have to fight for it. Ain't nobody gonna give us nothing. You got to fight for it. And it's the same way in these concentration camps. If you want to lay here and be treated like a human being and have these unjust laws and the deprivation of privileges and human rights addressed, you got to fight for it. And that's all I'm saying. And that's something I just want y'all to think about. And there's people out here on these streets that's working hard for those of us behind these walls that's willing to put in work for us. Law students willing to do pro bono work, paralegals, lawyers, progressive attorneys, organizations, revolutionary formations, etc. All we have to do is present a united front. You know what I'm saying? All we have to do is present ourselves with an outline and a platform and show that we committed and we willing to do the work. And have and build that inside-outside relationship. And with that, I'm going to say peace. Look for me. I think it's just about every week or whatnot, and I'll try to have an issue or important topic to talk about. And 9 times 10, I think the next issue I'm probably going to discuss is the Interstate Corrections Compact, where they're sending us out of state and sometimes into foreign countries without any form of due process, separating us from our families unjustifiably, often persecuting us for our politics and political views or religious views or because we're influential, etc. It's something that needs to be addressed, and it's something that the public needs to be made aware of. And with that, I'm going to say all power to the people and peace.
All power to the people. Well, thank you so much, Shaka.
Thank you, Shaka.
That we responded. Where there is repression, there will be resistance.
That was Shaka A. Shakur, our comrade from behind enemy lines, who is currently being held captive in the Virginia Department of Corrections. And you'll be hearing from him regularly. We are very honored to have Shaka as part of Liberation Center, as a comrade. And you can support him at shakashakur.org. Learn more about the Shaka Shakur Freedom Campaign, which is headquartered out of the Indianapolis Liberation Center. And you can also find his store there, where you can purchase books and pamphlets like From the Republic of New Africa to Palestine, which connects the struggles of Black people in the U.S. to those of the people of Palestine, the Middle East, and all oppressed people everywhere, just as we've been doing throughout this entire show. And to bring it back to Naptown, I'm going to turn it over to my comrade, Danny.
Okay, so today's Circle City shout out goes out to Michael Torres. Michael is the union president of ASME 962 and is an Indianapolis public librarian. And here at PSL, here at Naptown People's Radio, we love librarians. So since the late 1960s, AFSCME has become one of the most politicized unions in the AFL-CIO. It was here that the party first met Michael Torres during the library struggle of 2021. And that began on May 24th of that year when Bree Flannelly, a Black librarian who previously worked at the Central Library, addressed the board about the systemic white supremacy and ableism that the library leadership cultivated. Before the meeting, the CEO, Jackie Needis, got tipped off, knew that Bree was going to be giving a public comment, and contacted Flannelly to try and prevent her from speaking. When she did start speaking, board president Judge Jose Salinas at the time muted her microphone and told her, "No, you are not speaking." And it wasn't until Black board members intervened that they turned her mic back on and she was able to say her piece. Now, the struggle died down afterwards, unfortunately, and Needis put out the statement saying that she would not resign, despite the people calling for it, despite the people saying, like, this is not only a racist place to work, it's a hostile environment, but Jackie Needis herself is racist. However, on July 7, 2021, the Indie Liberation Center and AFSCME 962 held a press conference to address Needis' racist tactics and policies. And it was because of Michael Torres and the library union workers that the people were able to oust Needis from the Indy Public Library on August 20th, 2021. So, we started off the summer with Needis saying, "I'm not resigning." Absolutely not. And then by the end of the summer, because of the people, because of Michael Torres, because of the library workers, the people, Jackie Needis resigned. And Michael Torres, he reminds us that not only can everyday people make a difference in our lives, but change won't happen unless we make it happen, unless the people make it happen. And, the theme today has been freedom. And there's nothing more freeing than the people coming together and realizing we don't gotta take this. This is unacceptable. We're not putting up with this, and coming together and figuring out a way to change what is happening. So shout out to Michael Torres.
Shout out to Michael Torres.
Yeah. All right. So that's it for this episode of Naptown People's Radio. This week, comrades will be protesting at Hotel Tango. That'll be put on by Answer Comrades. Hotel Tango is putting on a fundraiser for Israeli occupation force veterans, which is wild. It's wild that is happening here in Indianapolis.
Like they need any more of our money. Right.
Like we're already sending millions of our dollars to Israeli forces right now. And Hotel Tango was like, yeah, let's give some more, I guess. So meet Answer at Edna Bowles Lacey Family Park, and that'll be at 6:00 on Thursday. We'll be there meeting, speaking, and then we're going to march down to Hotel Tango, and we will be picketing outside. So hopefully we can see you there. And then if you're listening to this on Wednesday morning, June 25th, tonight at 6, the PSL is putting on a liberation forum at the Indie Liberation Center. We will be talking about the attack on LGBTQ rights and people, and how, the people have risen up and fought back, and how we can continue to do that today. You may recognize the voice of the MC. Hint, it's me. So hopefully we can see you there. If you found today's discussion useful, pass it on, leave a comment, and listen for our next episode to drop. The road ahead is long, but we walk it together. Study with your comrades, build with your community, and always remember, theory without action is paralysis, but action without theory is chaos. Once again, I'm your host, Danny Abdullah, here with my co-host,
Derek Ford.
Stay dangerous, stay disciplined, and stay in the struggle.
We trying to create a movement. We got a chance to do something in Indiana that brothers like myself been talking about for the last 40 years. When I first became political and we was organized behind the walls in the 80s and 90s, some of the stuff that we doing now with the different programs and the different institutions that we have and things like the Indy Center is things that we used to talk about and dream about doing. And now we doing them. See what I'm saying? We doing it. And we got to keep that momentum going. And it's also generation. So as the next generation come up, you know what I'm saying, it's on y'all to take it to the next level and take it to the next stage.
Salute. Shakur.